What's number one? Federal crop insurance. So the federal government's providing crop insurance, pays a large portion, 60% of the insurance premiums, insuring against bad weather or low crop prices. Why don't farmers do this on their own? Why should the federal government do this? Number one. Number two, if the federal government does do it, the impact will be for farmers to plant more. Because if their insurance is subsidized, why not plant more? If things go wrong, they've got insurance subsidized by the federal government. So each year, bigger and bigger production when things go, and that pushes prices down, which triggers the insurance. Agricultural risk coverage, ARC and PLC, another $48 billion. These are more safety net programs to try and make sure that a farmer doesn't go bankrupt just because 1 year of low revenue. Well, farmers can provide this insurance on their own. They can buy it in the marketplace. They can sell part of their crop ahead of time as a way of insurance. The federal government steps in here. It's just a handout to farmers, which distorts their sense of risk, which leads to producing more and costing more money. Conservation Reserve Program, paying farmers not to farm. The idea is they take land out of production and then they're compensated for that, improving environmental health. Again, unintended consequences. You can research more about how that tends to backfire. Critics say ad hoc disaster assistance. If things go wrong, more money provided by the federal government. Conservation Easement Program, $500 million a year. The last two ones, environmental quality incentive programs, marketing assistant loans, dairy margarine recovery. These are all expensive federal programs. If none of them existed, economists would argue the world would be a better place. Farmers can figure this out on their own. Farm insurance companies can provide insurance, and we would have less production, and still farms could be profitable. Now, in a bad year, a number of farmers might go bankrupt because they can't cover their loans because of their reduced income, or they can't get new loans. But this happens with restaurants. 20% of restaurants go bankrupt every year because they weren't able to provide the services in the community. If farmers go bankrupt, does that put America at risk? Well, no. On the margin, some farms, due to location, management skills, water access, are more productive than others. We want a sort of a churn. We don't want anybody to go bankrupt. But unless some people who are on less capable land, marginal land, or have marginal skills, unless they go under and allow that resources to go someplace else, maybe back to the environment, maybe to hunting, maybe to ranching. We want a natural process of markets moving ownership and management of resources to those that are better able to do it. Government subsidies freeze people in. People continue to get support when they're not, for some reason, able to make money on their own. And in fact, the programs itself make it harder for people to survive because these subsidies keep going to the marginal producers. They keep producing, which keeps the price artificially low. So this is Handbook on Affordability from the Cato Institute. They say, let's repeal U.S. sugar programs. Just repeal them all. And we would have market-based sugar less expensive and less environmental damage and less cost to the taxpayer. Critics might say, well, sugar's a problem. We're having too much sugar anyway. Lower prices means people would consume more. That's an interesting case. We'll come back to that. Repeal all the tariffs and trade barriers on food products. America's already so productive. We have a huge advantage over most of the world in producing food. Maybe not Brazil, maybe they're even more productive, but Brazil specializes in some crops. The U.S. is better in other crops. But these tariffs and quotas, those could be eliminated. We want free trade, open trade with other countries in food, and we can make plenty of money that way. Remove tariffs on farm equipment and fertilizer, other key inputs, because our farms need those. If our farmers are paying more for farm equipment, they're at a disadvantage with farms in Mexico or Brazil or other countries. The Agricultural Guest Worker Program, we need workers to work on the farms. A lot of farm workers come from Mexico, from other countries, often in the orchards in Washington State and California. They come during harvest season, they do their work, they go back. A lot of people like to work this way, and they like to go back. I mean, nobody wants to spend winter in Cleveland if they don't have to. So they come to Washington State, pick the apples, pears, cherries, peaches, and then go back to Mexico for the winter if they can. If we have a guest worker program, they come into work. So labor could be 1/3 of total costs. It's hugely damaging if we can't get access to workers. And you say, well, gosh, why don't we do that work ourselves? Why don't we hire the homeless or hire the unemployed or get teenagers out there to do this work? Well, you can try, but this is hard work and highly skilled work, and it pays very well, interestingly, worth looking into. But why not have a guest worker program? It's inexpensive to fly up here, fly back on Southwest or other airlines, or to take the bus. What's the damage that causes? Repeal renewable fuel standards, and this is, I mentioned, the ethanol program. Eliminate all that, and then we have a great reduction in the cost and environmental damage for producing field corn for ethanol. And again, it's burning more energy to grow the corn, transport the corn, process the ethanol, transport the ethanol, and blend the ethanol at each of these plants, which raises the price of fuel, as well as is not as good, lowers our gas mileage and so forth. So without this, we would have less expensive food, less expensive gasoline. Is it an energy program or an ag program? And again, that's part of what the debate community has to decide. Another would be to abolish federal milk marketing orders, which are a New Deal era system that raises the price of milk and helps special interests, you would argue. Again, you can look this up at the Cato Handbook on Affordability. A brief aside here, it's funny about language. Farms compete with energy in the modern green energy world. So they're taking farms out of production to put in solar panels. They're taking farms out of production to put in windmills. Sometimes they're combining solar panels with farms, and then goats eating under the solar panels. Lots going on. But it's a funny thing about language. In the media, sort of the environmentalism, the Green New Deal, these are solar farms, these are wind farms. Well, actually, solar panels and windmills are factories. They're factories producing energy. They are as artificial as you could have, and they're not farms. They're called farms to make them sound environmentally friendly. What are farms, are the things being replaced as subsidies promote solar panels and special discounts that allow farmers that are struggling in many ways to contract out to solar industries. There's a series of videos from New York on this. They're locking up one of the last prairies in New York to some Canadian international solar operations. There's a lot, even though the Trump administration has tried to stop that, there's still a lot of it going on at the state level and through other federal programs. So is it farming or industry? Farming is farming. Wind and solar are not farming, but they're called wind farms and solar farms. So a number of interesting background stories in agriculture. The one thing is, amazing progress, humanprogress.org, which is part of the Cato Institute, I think. Since the Green Revolution in the 60s, we've had a huge increase in cereal production per hectare. So you see the green line from 60 to 2020, vast increase in tons per hectare of production. There's a lot of people who are very much against this corporate agriculture, and they call it industrial agriculture. These giant combines and operations, but the proponents say, yeah, but look at all the food it's producing. We're not worried about running out of food and starvation anymore. We're worried about people being overfed. However, there's a side to this, which is though the crop yields have increased, the nutrient density has decreased. So it's like the calories are stretched. We have less nutritious food, even though we have more of it in terms of calories, and I'll come back to that. But in this counter agricultural revolution, it's tricky because the MAHA movement, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. saying, look, we need organic farms, we shouldn't be using so much synthetic fertilizer, should be natural, and all these benefits of local and organic. However, Sri Lanka did this in 2021. They banned synthetic fertilizers for about 6 months. The idea was to go organic. Instead, they had mass food shortages, undernourishments, riots, and it's a disaster. Similarly, in 2022, the Dutch government had a crackdown on nitrogen emissions from agriculture, which led to protests by farmers, vastly higher costs, and a real mess. So you have concerns. People talk about the benefits of more natural farming. Critics say, yeah, you can't produce enough cattle on regenerative ranches or enough food in organic or regenerative agriculture. So pushing this from the top down is going to be a disaster. We'll come back to that. And there's more to this story about the anti-egg people who seem to think we should all be growing our own food in our backyard. So, positive though about regenerative agriculture, there's a huge boom in this. This is the Bouzouki Group, and they are supporting initiatives that focus on the conditions of the soil. The argument is, and these are a bunch of partners involved, they're saying you can increase productivity from regenerative ranching and agriculture in a number of different ways, and they're saying we have a problem because our soil quality is decreasing, over 80 to 100 years, and we can try and throw more fertilizer and pesticide in it, but there's a mystery, sort of invisibles in the agriculture and ranching world that unless we recognize, we're in trouble. And they point out that every past civilization was destroyed when it destroyed its soil. So what is regenerative agriculture? Well, it's focus on the soil. The process of restoring degraded soils using practices adaptive grazing, no-till planting, limited use pesticide and fertilizer, multi-paddock grazing. That's discussed in this webpage. So, but we're debating agriculture. Well, the debate is on federal agricultural policy. The broader debate is, how should people farm? Which land should be in agriculture? Which lands for windmills? Which lands for wilderness? And what crops should be grown? And how do you grow them? So a couple books on this, again, on this regenerative agriculture. This one, Growing a Revolution, is David Montgomery. I'll have more books from him. This is about bringing the soil back to life, which is recognizing the invisible role of microbes in the soil. And we'll discuss, and these people are saying they're getting better yields, the crop yield is more, they're saving money with less fertilizer and pesticide. There's a more radical book, Richard Manning, saying, hey, wait a minute, agriculture was a mistake in the first place. Civilization should have, you've got goats and sheep and cattle, you're fishing, you've got acorns and olives, but grain agriculture was damaging. The anthropologists, when they dig up old graves from thousands of years ago, they can tell what people ate, like in ancient Egypt, because the people that ate grain are all diseased, their teeth are bad, and they're suffering from many diseases that meat eaters aren't, according to the carnivores, the advocates of meat and fish in our diet. This is another one on the ecology of grasslands. But here's the sort of the big story. Again, you saw the graph of agricultural yields going up and up and up. That looks like great news. But in the last century, the mineral content of our vegetables, cabbage, lettuce, tomato, spinach, has dropped 80 to 90% from 1914 to 2018. So the calcium, magnesium, and iron, other nutrients that were in the grain and the vegetables are gone. That's because they're not in the soils. The soils used to be rich in those minerals. As the soils were degraded or as the crop yields increased, these minerals are sort of stretched through a larger carbohydrate content. So a vegetarian 100 years ago might have been able to eat more healthy vegetables than they do today because of the drop in the density. Similarly, 5 billion people aren't getting enough iodine around the world, vitamin E, calcium. 4 billion people don't get enough iron, riboflavin, folate, vitamin C. So the argument is poorer soils around the world are leading to crops that are not as nutrient dense and lack the minerals that are key to human health. So in the books that David Montgomery and his wife Ann Bickel have written, The Growing Revolution is one. Another is The Hidden Half of Nature and What Your Food Ate. And their argument is that, again, healthy soils depends on microbes, trillions of microbes. And unless the microbes are there, your plants aren't going to be nutrient rich and your animals are going to have less healthy plants. What your food ate is not only the richness of the soil to feed an onion, a carrot, or what's that, a radish on the right in that book cover, but also, chicken and other animals. If they're eating, soy and corn that's got less nutrients because the soil's not rich, then the pigs and the chicken are less nutrient dense themselves. So really what the food we eat, the nutritional value of it depends on what it ate. And so that's where we want to get back into the soil and figure out how to restore healthy soils. So you can see more about David Montgomery, and they're not saying that this is something that needs federal support or is money losing. They're claiming these farmers are making a lot of money once they learn how to run regenerative agriculture, low-till, no-till farming, as well as multi-paddock grazing for ranching. Once they figure out how to do that, they can have much better soil, and the food is much more healthy, and they make money. They can increase the number of cattle, like 50% on the land when they adapt to multi-paddock grazing. So another fellow who speaks on this is Peter Ballastat, gives talks on ruminants, and the argument is human beings developed over thousands of years with ruminants, with buffalo in the in Native America, with cattle in Europe, other animals that eat the grass and often forage on systems that aren't good for growing crops. So the value of protein, the nutrient density of meat. He jokes that he's part of a secret society called the Ruminati, and ruminants are a particular kind of animal that has multiple stomachs that can create nutrient-dense food out of grass that we can't, and that pigs and chicken can't. So our overview, the importance of the history, especially economic history in agriculture. Economics in One Lesson is a classic book by the Foundation, published by the Foundation for Economic Education, and one chapter is on agriculture. Leonard Read, the founder of the Foundation for Economic Education, if you could push the button to end federal funding of agricultural policies, would you do it? Should you do it? Would the world be a better place? Great story from New Zealand, which bankrupted itself with interventionist, subsidized egg programs. Finally, they ran out of money. A socialist government abolished them all in 1 year. The view was that it would be a disaster. Farmers would go bankrupt. People would starve. Instead, New Zealand agriculture and ranching blossomed. The farmers adapted. They were entrepreneurial. Now they're leading the world in production of meat, butter, fish, oysters, all sorts of things because of the entrepreneurial spirit once they were released of these federal regulations and subsidies that blocked them from being successful, productive, profitable farmers. We also have notes on the science of GMO technology and regulation. So reforming ending federal agricultural water programs. A lot of times water is mispriced. So they're raising rice in the desert north of Sacramento. Why? Because the water is super cheap. Why not let water go to more valued uses? Well, there's a problem with water policy, the same with growing cotton in the desert around Phoenix. Put a price on water. Why shouldn't you say everyone has a right to water? Well, a right to water to drink maybe, but not to grow rice in the desert or corn in the desert or alfalfa in the desert in California. And then there are various federal environmental programs that are restricting agriculture, making it much more expensive. So if you got rid of the subsidies or sunset the subsidies, you could also free up farmers by reducing other regulations that make their farming much more expensive and much more difficult. So removing these barriers together would, critics say, lead to more innovative agriculture that wouldn't cost taxpayers, would be better for the environment, and would lead to more nutrient-dense foods. And I mentioned economics in one lesson, and this is, again, the story of the history of that, and then articles from FEE and others on New Zealand farmers breaking FEE of crippling subsidies. This is again from 10 years ago, but it's a lesson for what would happen, could happen, if you were to get rid of counterproductive U.S. federal agricultural programs. So what did they do? Again, the stuff was thrown out overnight. Farmers reinvented. Now New Zealand's a powerhouse on the world stage. The story of how that happened: they eliminated 30 different agricultural subsidies and export incentives, and New Zealand did fine. And you can look this up on your own. But now we have innovative stories from New Zealand that could be the story for the U.S. I'll stop here. Thank you very much for listening. And I'll try and put some links and notes as well. Thank you.